For this video, I'm going to be going over the player movement for the 3D Unity game. First off, you have the mouse, which can look around. That allows the player to look around. And then you have either the WASD keys or the arrow keys that can be used for physically moving the character. Trying to see what's going on. And yeah, so that's the basics of the movement. You will notice right now that the main camera is a child object of the player character. Generally, when you start the scene, you'll have the main camera being outside. Once you create your player character, you're just going to move the main camera and make it a child of the player character. This will allow the camera to essentially follow the player character. And as you can see here, it looks like it's almost inside the player character. It's actually just the slightest bit in front of them, or else you would have issues with clipping. And I can show you that if I just keep pulling it back. You can see right here it's starting to clip through everything. And this is also how you could easily make it a third-person perspective by just adjusting how the camera is. For this, we're going to stick with first-person perspective just because that's how I like it. And let's go over the movement for the player character. If I go here, you can see the script, player controller, and this is the player controller script. This is not my script. The one I wrote was not nearly as clean as this. I found this one in a video down below. So I'm using their script because it just worked a little bit better than mine did. So first off, you're going to see it declaring quite a few different variables. We'll go over each of these as necessary. You'll see the usual functions, start and update, and you'll see this move function right here. And here's where the move function is defined. It's going to start off with doing character controller. Controller is equal to get component, character controller. This is made right here in the PC. You just hit add component and you can add the character controller. This allows just for easier movement in the game and compatibility. So if the controller is grounded, so essentially it's checking is the controller on the ground. So this is all just for the jump. So if the controller is grounded, feed move direction with the input. So it's going to be looking at where your character is currently moving and how fast they're moving. So if you were to run and then jump, it would include that running momentum that you have. It's using a vector 3, which means it has 3 directions. The X is obviously the horizontal direction, right? The Y we are not using in this instance. We're actually zeroing out the Y. The Y gets taken care of down here. And then the Z refers to essentially the angle, I guess you could say. And it's going to be using the input.getAccessVertical. So horizontal always looks at the left and right. Vertical always looks at the up and down, which makes sense. Move direction is equal to transform direction, move direction, right? So it's essentially saying that whatever values you got, you want to be using the transform values. Here, there we go. And then you're going to multiply it by the speed at which you were moving, or the speed that the character moves already. And then jumping. So this is the actual jump that's occurring, and you'll notice that the move direction.y, which is this move direction right here, is getting set by the jump speed. So the speed itself is setting how fast you are actually moving, and then the jump speed is how high you're going to be jumping. And then for actually physically looking around and looking, that's going to be this second portion of the code. First is the turner, which is the x-axis. And then it's multiplying it by a variable called sensitivity. By essentially multiplying it by sensitivity, you can make it more or less sensitive for the player, and that can make it a little bit more responsive and easier. It's easier to adjust it this way by including this variable on both of them. You'll also notice that for the input of the looker, which is the y direction, it is a negative input. The reason for this is that naturally, if you were to do it without that negative input, it would use inverted controls where up is down and down is up. Some players like it this way. I think majority don't like inverted controls, and I do not like them, so I use the negative input get access in order to not use inverted controls. Okay. So this one, so the turner, so pretty much just saying if the turner is not 0, so essentially if the mouse is moved, it's going to transform it into this new vector 0, and then obviously the x value 0, and the looker is using the y value. And then as soon as the transform.Euler's angle is 0, it's going to stop. So essentially that means you'll move the mouse, it'll move, the camera will move to follow the mouse, and then it'll stop once the mouse stops moving. And this allows you to continue to move it around. And then it's going to be applying the gravity to the controller. So you have the move direction.y minus the gravity times time delta time. The purpose of this is to make sure that the gravity is being applied directly when somebody is jumping. And it prevents essentially your character from actually having issues with the overall gravity. By having this be a separate variable rather than the usual physics gravity, you're able to give your character a little bit more jumping, for lack of a better word. You have a little bit more of a finer control than if you were to use the physics engine's gravity, because if you change the physics engine's gravity, you could be changing all the objects. This is just one way of doing it, so you're only changing the player. You're able to change it just a little bit faster. There's also a way of doing this using Unity itself, but this is just one line of code, and it's an easy way to do it. Finally, you're making the character move, so you're doing controller dot move function, and you're putting in the move direction, which you are figuring out up here, right? As long as the character is on the ground, you want to be taking in the move direction, and then you're multiplying it by time delta time. The point of multiplying it by time delta time is so essentially it's going to move the same way regardless of what frame you are running at. If you don't have this here, it'll actually change how it's running depending on how many frames your computer is able to run it. And yeah, so that is the player controller script I am currently using for my game. That is how I have the camera following, and I think that is it.